Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com.
You have to run to stay in front. Welcome to another episode
of Unfiltered, only on Past the Wire TV.
History remembers moments of extraordinary strength, skill, and determination. True greatness is forged by those who fulfill their destiny.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Past the Wire's Breeders' Cup Win and You're In series. This one obviously is going to be exciting. We've got a major event. We're going to start right off with that. Michael Wilson and myself. We've got 5 to cover. This is a little bit of a busy one. 5 Breeders' Cup Win and You're In races this weekend, led by none other than who is being heralded as the next super horse, compared to Secretariat, moving like a tremendous machine, Flightline, just off the track record in the Pacific Classic, 126 buyer for those of you who are buyer figure fans. Let's start with Flightline and all the rage. I know we haven't discussed this, but I know you have kind of migrated to the Flightline bandwagon, along with 99.9% of the rest of the racing world.
Yeah, you can't really say anything, right? So, you know, the horses that he beat are substantial horses. So my initial concern with that horse was, and I've seen it far too often in this game, right? I've worked with really fast horses that are great at 6, great at 7, great at a mile, and then you ask them to stretch to the mile and a quarter and they can't be found on the screen. So that was what my initial concern was. And, you know, everybody can quote me, I doubted the horse. You know, I didn't think his speed would stretch to a mile and a quarter. And boy, was I wrong. I mean, you know, to be able to do what he did the other day is, I haven't seen anything like it, at least in my lifetime in racing. To be able to go 159 and 1 at Del Mar is pretty substantial. So I don't know what else can be said other than, you know, it looks to me that everybody's running for second in the Classic if he can duplicate that race.
Okay, the key phrase there was if he can duplicate that race. And I would tend to agree. If he runs that race, the race is surely for second. But again, racing is never that simple. There's never any such thing, despite what anybody says, as a quote free square. And I've got some questions, and I will be the first to say he absolutely was awe-inspiring. He impressed me. He ran much better than I thought he was going to. I did think he would win. I did think he should win. And I think he did what he was supposed to do, but he certainly did it in a fashion that was eye-catching, fast, and impressive in every way that you can possibly be impressive, from his swagger to the way he ran to his attitude. Everything was great. But here are some questions that I think are worth asking, okay? And I think you're the guy to ask, because I think you'll be objective, and you've got that trainer background to pull from. It has been said and not disputed that after all of his races, he has required a month of nothing. They just kind of take it easy with him. Don't let him do anything. No going to the track. Can't find hiding a hair from him, stays in the stall or whatever it is they do. Maybe they walk him in the shed row. I don't know, but he certainly doesn't do any work. That to me is indicative of some type of soundness or issue, okay? And John Sadler has done a masterful job at nursing him along through that issue, which common sense tells me is probably more significant than they let on, okay? So now he's got to come back first week in November. I don't think he's afforded that luxury of just chilling for a month. So has him nursing the horse and only having 5 starts over a couple of years put him in a position where now he can withstand training up into the Breeders' Cup, or does it put him at a disadvantage, or is he a horse that maybe still doesn't make the race or has to scratch because he doesn't hold up to that type of training? So I think that, and not to take away from anything, and there'll be those, the haters out there that say, oh, you're knocking him or you're not giving him his due. And I'm not doing that at all if you bother to listen to what I'm saying. He runs that race, they're running for second. But can he repeat that race? And are those legitimate questions? To me, they're legitimate questions for a smart bettor.
Yeah.
I don't care what anybody says. But are they legitimate questions from a horseman standpoint?
100%. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I have not liked this horse up until now, especially at the 1.25 mile distance. And, is he a horse where you do have to consider breeding to him? Yes. But the question is, what are his soundness issues? Will we ever know? And, they've spaced this horse out substantially to be able to get these 5 wins, over the course of 2 years, right? Since he debuted. I think he debuted I don't remember when he debuted,
Right.
But basically the question is, what exactly are they dealing with? And does he come up in as good a shape as he has? Obviously, they pick races far enough out. They target those races, they give him the time he needs, and then they prepare him for those races, and they don't deviate from the plan. And as you said, John Sadler has been nothing but masterful in terms of timing to get this horse perfect on every day that he runs. So now you have to come back in 2 months, and you have to hope that, maybe there's less downtime in this horse's schedule. But the other thing, and if I say he duplicates that race and everybody's running for second, there's more that comes into the Classic, I think, than what meets the eye. And if he's running a race against, him and Life is Good, and we've talked about how good Life is Good is, I don't think, obviously Life is Good is a phenomenal horse who's shown it. These two could hook up in a speed duel and set it up for somebody else. It could get crazy fast, and it could set up for a horse.
No question about it. And here's another thing I'll say. Just well, I brought up his PPs. He debuted April of 2021. Okay.
2021.
He ran back September of 2021. Then he ran back in December, October, November, that's 3 months, December of 2021, then June of 22 and September of 22. So he's got 5 starts in 2 years, and he's a 4-year-old. Okay.
Yeah.
He's won them all from 13 lengths. His shortest margin of victory was the Met Mile, which was 6 lengths. But if Life is Good is as good as you and I tend to think he is, okay, and he runs in the Classic and goes to the lead, Flightline sits second or third for a little bit and then engages him probably relatively early because he wants to go, and Pratt's not going to let Life is Good waltz. That sets up a little differently than what we saw last Saturday, because I have to think that he's just not going to cruise by Life is Good the way he did against Mandela's horse, who was on the lead from the rail. I would imagine Life is Good is going to have a little bit more fight than that, and that could, he's shown versatility where he hasn't broke well, and he's kind of gotten a little bit of shuffle and gone on and win. But he's never been in a fight where he had to throw down and, put a horse away and then draw off like that and possibly hold off somebody closing. And again, I'm going to reiterate it because I just don't want the, people to take it wrong, taking nothing away from the, devastating Pacific Classic that he won. But I think, to crown him the Breeders' Cup winner at this point is certainly premature, and that's whether he wins it or loses it come November.
But you just pointed out, right? So his last race was June, and now he's come back in September. So he's just done June, July, August, September. So the question is, how long was it in between those 2 races? Was it 2 months? Was it 2.5? Or did he get when was that race in June?
The race in June was June 11th and came back
June 11th.
So July
June,
11th,
July,
August 11th,
August.
almost
So 3
a
months.
week shy
Yeah.
of 3 months, a week shy of 3 months.
And what that sounds like, if you look at his PPs, they usually space him out every 3 months, if not longer. So now you're coming
Right.
back in 2. So that is the real question of, does he need that 1 month of nothing? Does he then need 2 months of training to get him back to where he needs to be able to fire on the day? This would then beg a different question. You either have to only give him 2 weeks and then take the 6 weeks to keep him going in the right direction to run, which that might not be enough time. So there's all different types of modalities that can be used in between. California is a little bit, he could be a horse that could be swimming in that interim or doing something like aquatread to help him out, especially going from where he's at to where he's going to be. I think he's usually been kept in Sadler's barn at Santa Anita. The only swimming facility in Southern California is San Luis Rey. And I don't recall, but he might. I think Sadler does have a string at San Luis Rey. So they might have to change how they approach this, right? Because you're going to have to keep the horse fit to then get him back ready to take on the horses in the Classic. And maybe John's just been so good that they always knew the Classic was the target, and they've spaced him out enough knowing that, hey, I only got 2 months from the Pacific Classic to the Classic, and I have him right where I want him, and I know what to do to get there. So I think those are questions. Again, Sadler's done a masterful job with him.
He really
Sadler's
has.
and he's one of the best trainers at winning grade ones in Southern California. What he doesn't have, and what's been very interesting, is he's got a very poor record in the Breeders' Cup until Accelerate broke through for him. So that is the question of, the trainer's phenomenal, and I'm not taking anything away from John. I have the utmost respect for him. Is he underestimating what he needs to have this horse ready for the Breeders' Cup Classic coming up against, and the horse, I think, when we discuss all of this, that pops into my mind that could actually give this horse a run for his money if the race sets up like I think it's going to, would be Epicenter. I think Epicenter might take that jump, because here we've seen a horse that can actually sit off the pace. He can stalk and he can close, and he can be closer if he needs to be. And if you got 2 speed horses that are crazy speed horses, Life is Good is pretty much a runoff, and so is this thing, Flightline. If you saw Pratt, the horse is tossing his head at the half-mile pole, and he's like, I can't handle this horse fighting me. I'm just going to let him out. And then obviously the horse ran away from the field. If you got another horse like that side by side, where you've got 2 horses, and we've seen Life is Good throw down 44. We've seen that horse go as fast as Flightline has. So let's say those 2 horses say, we can't hold them, we can't handle them, let them roll, let's see what happens. I think the race then puts it in a position where somebody who rides a bit smarter race on a tractable horse like Epicenter could come and run them down. Now, if you can run 159, there's very few horses that can do that. So I can't say, hey, look, you're going to get gassed and somebody's going to come get you. But if you're pressed a little bit earlier and instead of the 23-46, you're going 45 or crazy pace, which we've seen before, 44, who the heck knows what happens when they turn for home. So I think he is a substantial horse. He's a horse that needs spacing. So I think that's a big question mark of where he shows up on Breeders' Cup Classic Day with the spacing he now has and how they manage that. And then also what happens in the fold of the race, because it's not a race that's going to be devoid of speed. There's going to be plenty of speed horses in there.
Right. And all that makes it interesting. And we're going to spend a little bit more time on Flightline, because I'm going to say that this show with you and I is probably going to be the most honest and objective discussion of Flightline that anybody's going to see out there. Okay, I will tell you that. Okay, and I've seen a lot of what people are saying already. I normally don't pay attention, but this horse is getting so much hype that I'm just curious as to the takes of a lot of people. And I always think that most of the takes are bad on all these situations, and we'll get to that. But first, I want to ask you some interesting questions. I'm going to go now and ask you to put your bloodstock hat on, okay? Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and then you can summarize your answer.
Right.
How much is Flightline worth as a stallion right now? How much does that increase if he wins the Breeders' Cup? How much does it decrease if he should lose the Breeders' Cup? And are they in a situation where you've got to balance or talk about a risk and reward situation and risk losing the Breeders' Cup and the quote super horse status that he enjoys today, where, and you know I want him to run. I'm a racing fan, so I don't, again, people will take this the wrong way, but if you and I own Flightline and I said to you, hey, Mike, am I nuts? Or maybe we don't run in the Breeders' Cup. Let's go out now, the best there ever was, and make the greatest stud deal we could make, and, you know, start counting the money and, you know, getting wires to Tahiti on the beach, drinking pina coladas. I mean, is that a crazy scenario? How does that play out on the breeding side? Or am I just way off base that the risk and reward, if he should win the cup, just says you got to go for it and that's it?
I think so. I think the stud deal is pretty much done. You know, he's owned in part by Woodford Racing, which is Lane's End, and he's planning on standing at Lane's End Farm. So whether there's going to be a sale of him or not, or how they restructure that partnership once he goes to stud, I'm not quite sure. But looking at it, if I was to look at him today and look at him as a horse that's done what he's done in his 5-race career, and you retire him right now, he's a horse that I think you could probably stand between, and it depends. Lane's End does things. I love their operation. I think they do a phenomenal job. I think they have great stallions, and I think they're very market friendly as to what they stand their stallions for. They don't overprice them and they don't underprice them. They price them very appropriately. I still think, knowing the hype, knowing what he's done, knowing where he is right now, you could probably stand him for 200,000 next year and have a full book of mares. Okay.
I was thinking 200, and I'm not no expert, so okay. I'm
so I think 200,000, you have a full book of mares. Does he need to go on and win the Breeders' Cup Classic? No. If he avoids the Breeders' Cup Classic, does it look like he's dodging horses? Potentially, but I don't think it's going to ruin his reputation going into stud. If he loses the Breeders' Cup Classic, does it damage what he could stand for? More than likely, right? And I think you'd have to say, okay, well, Super Horse got beat once he faced the best horses in the country on the biggest day. And then I think it takes a hit for his stud fee as to what he will stand for. So the question is, again, timing, right? Is timing been perfect? Have they figured out how to peak him and keep him peaked for the Breeders' Cup Classic? And if there is a hesitancy at all, which could be interesting, he could be a horse where they say, you know, spacing wise, let's skip the Breeders' Cup Classic and let's go for the Pegasus. Because that could still be enough to where if he went Pegasus and won that impressively, it's not going to damage him. So it'll be interesting what they do. I'm sure they're probably looking at the Breeders' Cup Classic and pointing towards that. If he puts that in his cap, do I think it increases his stud fee? No, I think he stays right at 200,000. I think right now he's at the peak of where he's going to be. I don't think a win helps him.
Then what you're saying, without saying it, is that all they can really do by running him is devalue him stud fee wise, not increase it stud fee wise. And I think that's an interesting take. And it's an interesting gamble, because there's an underlying thing here. There are a lot of people, and again, you're a bloodstock expert, I'm not, but I do know enough people who breed and are in the game. And, you know, I was talking to one guy who's a very active breeder and, you know, has some shares in some really nice horses, and said, hey, listen, there are a lot of people out there that are reluctant to breed to a horse that might have soundness issues, you know, no matter how good that horse was on the racetrack. And then there are some people that completely overlook it because they say, hey, if he was that good, you know, with some issues, imagine what he would have been without those issues, and his offspring may not have those issues, and he may throw one that's even better than him. So there's two schools of thought on that, but I don't think it's the no-brainer that everybody seems to think it is.
Well, and that's where, going back, right? Would I breed a mare to him? I would consider it, but I would want to know what those issues were, right? So if he's a horse,
will that come out? Will that come out within the industry once he goes to stud? Does someone with a mare have the right to ask that and get legitimate full disclosure, or no?
You might get whispers. You might get, but when they get to the breeding shed, typically, what they dealt with in their racing career, you don't hear much about unless you get it specifically from the trainer. So there's certain horses, you know, like I know, and, you know, from being around the racetrack, that Honor Code had some foot problems when he raced. So if I'm going to send a mare there, I want to make sure that he's, you know, I send something with good feet. And It could be potentially because most storm cats had bad feet, right? And his
Right.
honor code's out of a storm cat mare. So when you go into certain territory with certain stallions that you're breeding to, you know what they tend to throw. When you're dealing with something brand new coming off the racetrack, and people can say that all day, there's two sides in our industry, right? There are those who breed to race, and there are those who breed to sell. And those are completely different markets. So as a breed to sell, he makes a lot of sense. Exciting stallion, superstar, throw a grade one mare at him, put that foal in the ring, and if it's halfway good looking, let it roll, and somebody's going to pay a lot of money for it. Breed to race, you might think a little bit differently, right? So you're taking your mare, which you know the mare might have dealt with, and then you're trying to pair it with a stallion that you think could create good offspring, and you're trying to manage and balance A, what the mare is going to produce, and A, what you think the stallion is going to produce. So you have to, I really like to try and get as much information as possible. I think we kind of know that in certain camps, you get less information out of people than you would in other camps. So the question is, Lane's End is very honest. So kudos to them. We might get information once the horse hits the breeding shed as to what he dealt with in racing and why he's been spaced and what are some of the issues. So, but if it went to other farms, personally, I think you'd never have an idea of what bothered him. So
That's interesting.
do they need to disclose? Sometimes you have to press certain operations to really understand what that horse dealt with. And even sometimes when you inspect stallions, there'll be days where they don't show a horse because it's dealing with an issue. And then that's the difference, though. There are those of us in the industry that know every horse deals with issues, right? None of them are perfect. None of them are 100%. And so those of us who understand that can go and look at a horse and say, oh, he's got an abscess. He's sore, but the abscess is going to go away in 3 days and it's never going to be an issue. And, you know, hell, I'll still breed to the horse at 150,000 or whatever it is. And there'll be others who don't know, and they'll walk and they'll say, oh gosh, the stallion's lame. I'm never breeding my mare to something like that. So it comes down to knowledge base. And so the same thing, right? You've got to protect your investment. If you're a stallion farm, you have to protect the stallion, because there are those who don't have a thorough knowledge base, who might make a snap judgment decision on a horse that might not be true. So it's the same thing. And you can tell me, and people say it all the time, oh, I don't breed to stallions with low career starts or unsound stallions. Most stallions in the breeding shed nowadays, Justify had what, 7 starts? Maybe, I think 7 or 8. I mean, he didn't have a ton. So yeah, that would be a stallion.
That many. You know, we talked on a couple of the Unfiltered shows about transparency and the need for more of it in sales and whatnot. And I just got an idea that people can credit us for, okay? Carfax.
Yeah.
Carfax. You need horse facts. You need a central database that you can go to. All the vet records are there. All the issues are there. And when you buy a used car, let the buyer beware. But you can go in there and say, hey, I want the Carfax. Give me the Carfax. And it's got to have everything on it. If you order parts, okay, and it makes the Carfax. You follow me? Same thing. Should be something like that for horses. Get the horse facts, should be available to bettors and breeders, because that would create a lot of transparency, which I think is something the game needs. Now, I'm going to address something else. I'm curious to your take on it. Sticking with Flightline, I think he earned a bulk of the attention, so I don't feel bad about giving him the bulk of the attention. I think he earned that on the racetrack, so I'm gonna go on with that, because like I said, I think this is going to be the best and most honest dissection of Flightline that you will see to date. People are comparing him with the best of all time, okay, and the greatest ever. All right, and I'll say this, full disclosure. I don't do that with any horse. If you ask me, John, who was the best horse you ever saw? I can't answer that question. I've seen Flightline. I've seen Spectacular Bid. I've seen Ruffian. I've seen Secretariat. Go back a long way. Go back further than that. Kelso, 4-time Horse of the Year. Forgo, 7 furlongs, 1.5 miles. That's his horseshoe up there, Windermere Mile, 130-something pounds. Okay. Citation, won the Derby, won the Preakness, ran in between the Preakness and the Belmont, and won that. What kind of triple crown is that? So, you know, Tom Brady, phenomenal quarterback. And everybody likes to use the new term today. What? GOAT, GOAT, GOAT. To me, there's no such thing as a GOAT, and I'll tell you why. Tom Brady was probably, okay, better quarterback than Johnny Unitas, okay, than Joe Namath. Statistically, certainly, but the game is very different today than it was then. When then a receiver come off the line, you were allowed to check him and almost take his head off. I seen Joe Namath and Johnny Unitas get hit by defensive linemen and linebackers, spear straight into the knees, helmet first, and get up and call the next play. I don't know that Tom Brady gets up from a shot like that. So when you say GOAT, you know what I mean? And you say, oh, Flightline was better than Secretariat, or is that good, or a quote horse of a lifetime, I just laugh at that. I don't go down that road. I don't think it's applicable. I don't think you can compare horses from different generations. I don't think you can really compare in a non-subjective or completely opinion matter. And we know opinions are what they're like. Everybody's got one and we know what they are. I don't think you can really do that. I think it's irrelevant. It may be fun to say, but my thought is, he ran a phenomenal race. He's an extremely talented horse. He's one of the most exciting horses we've seen in a long time, but best ever, horse of a lifetime. I just don't subscribe to that. I've seen so many phenomenal horses, and so many horses do so much more than he's done. So that's just my take. And again, I'm going to say it for the 100th time on this show. It's not taking anything away from him or being negative towards him in any way. Phenomenal race. Okay. Loved watching it. Was great to see it. Can't wait to see it again in the Breeders' Cup, and maybe even him have to really, show even more and what could happen. I love the sport and I love great horses and I applaud them. But greatest ever, better than Secretariat, better than Seattle Slew, better, and there's been other horses that are like him that had that air. Danzig comes to mind, okay?
Right.
Danzig, they said, could have been anything. Hoist the Flag, could have been anything. Jean Crouget wrote Hoist the Flag, okay? Said he was better than Seattle Slew, okay? He'd probably know. If he's better than Seattle Slew, might be made better than Flightline. Nonsense to me. Just gibberish talk. What's your take on all the comparisons that, best ever, horse of a lifetime? I mean, give me your assessment on that.
So I think you hit the nail on the head, right? So when I look at best of all time in different athletic categories, yes, games change, and yes, games are different now than they were then. I look at body of work. And that's kind of how I delineate. Now, if I look at Flightline, I'm not taking anything away from him. He's a super horse. But if you want to say he's better than Secretariat and he's better than these horses, and the question is, what are you basing that off of? Because if you're basing it off of time, Spectacular Bid ran 1.25 miles in 1:57. Nobody's come close to that ever, right? So if you want to go off that, Spectacular Bid's faster than him. If you want to go off a winning margin, Secretariat has won races by a larger margin. If you want to talk about wins over a career.
Ghost Zappa got a higher buyer. If you want to talk buyers, he got a 128. He only got a 126. Ghost Zappa's
so it depends on what you want to categorize it on. And look, there's a basketball player that I loved him. Thought he was so talented. One of the most talented NBA players we've ever seen. And he would never be put in the GOAT conversation. And he reminds me a lot of Flightline. And that's Derrick Rose, right? Derrick Rose comes in, youngest MVP in NBA history, and knee injury, comes back, plays at a high level. Bang, another knee injury, comes back, plays back at a high level. But you would never say, well, because Derrick Rose was the youngest MVP, that he's better than Michael Jordan. Nobody would ever talk about that. Michael Jordan had a bigger body of work. Now, why when people talk about Jordan versus LeBron and versus Kobe and versus this, and Jordan doesn't even get into the discussion of GOAT. But if you really wanted to look at it, in Jordan's day, the game was very physical. Michael Jordan rose to the occasion, and he played at a high level, even in a very physical game, and he rarely missed time while playing. Bigger body of work, huge accomplishment. Some people like to say LeBron because he's lasted longer. Well, now you have spacing of games. You space these players out. You do load management for these athletes. So I think, is he one of the greatest horses we've seen in the last couple of years? Sure. But if you tell me, and I throw a race together that has Justify, American Pharaoh, Arrogant, Flightline, Life is Good, him, I'm very curious as to how it pans out, because here's the difference, right? And you've got to look at it at different ways. Superior athletes are superior athletes, right? So Usain Bolt, nobody was going to beat Usain Bolt. He was just faster than everybody. it's a sprint race. So all you have to do is be faster than everybody. Well, once you get into races that are a distance, like a miler, as a runner, human runner, same thing with a horse race. Now different things come into play. Great athletes against other great athletes, or super athletes against other super athletes. Now the mental component comes into play. It's not just about speed. So yes, did he beat Country Grammar? Country Grammar won the Saudi Cup and ran second, right? He ran second in the Dubai World Cup.
Yeah.
Or which order did he do it? I can't remember.
He won
right
one, ran second and another, right?
So phenomenal horse. It's a different caliber when you talk about American Pharaoh, Justify, Arrogant. When Arrogant was arrogant, right? End of his 3-year-old year, getting into his 4-year-old year. Secretariat. Heck, you even said a horse, and nobody would talk about him as the GOAT, and he was phenomenal. Go Sapper, right? Throw Go Sapper in the mix. Throw some of these super mile and a quarter horses in the mix in the same race, and it's a very different outcome, in my opinion. But yes, did he make a group of grade 1 winners look like claimers? Absolutely, right? And that's where you got to say, wow, that was extremely impressive. This year, does he look like the best horse at the mile and a quarter? Yes. So what is the deciding factor, and could really say, is he the super horse that everybody thinks he is go head to head with Life is Good, with Epicenter sitting in that race, with a couple other horses that can close and stalk. And if you're still able to devour those horses like you just did in the Pacific Classic, hats off to you. Does that make you the greatest of all time? No. I don't think he's in that discussion. I think he's in the discussion of an amazing horse. I think he's in the discussion of, and some people said, so impressively, is he one of the most impressive horses in recent years? Yes. But then somebody said, well, he's better than Zenyatta. He's better than Rachel. Body of work. Those two fillies achieved a heck of a lot more than he has. Right. Is he more impressive than them? Yes. So that's how I look at it. Impressive is different than credentials, right? So he's got enough credentials now to talk to him as the best horse in the country and potentially the best horse in the world at this point in time. He has more credentials that he needs to add to his resume before I'd say best horse ever, right? And I don't even think, because he'll retire at the end of the year, so you can't even have that discussion. He's gonna make 6 starts and be retired.
Right. And that's why I just laugh at all that. And although we're going to talk turf and dirt right now, if you look at what Baid is doing in Europe right now, he's every bit as impressive as Flightline is over there. And that's on turf. They don't win by, that many lengths on the grass over there. He almost does. But I mean, look at what he's doing right now at the same time amongst the best grass horses in Europe, who we know are better than the grass horses over here most of the time. I mean, look at Baid. How do you not? I mean, you can't say he's a better horse than Baid. They run on 2 different surfaces. I'd love to see them somehow race on a surface they both could handle, but I mean, just those conversations are just so subjective. And when people say, best I've ever seen and horse of a lifetime and this and that, it just, to me, takes away all credibility of what they're saying. And my opinion, and an unpopular one, it's almost like a disservice to the horse. You know what I mean? Because you're just showing that, you're raving about a horse, but you're also showing that you really don't understand the game, at least in my opinion. And I don't mean that as a disrespect. I mean that more to maybe make people look at it from a broader point of view, if possible. People usually
and this game, and I think where it comes down to, and it's sometimes for someone like myself, and probably my greatest skill set is being able to connect with horses. I've been termed by some people as a horse whisperer. I understand them. I see them. I can understand what they're thinking instantly. I can watch a race and understand mentally what's going on in the race. I've worked with horses that people can't handle. I once worked with a horse that savaged people, and they wanted to euthanize him because he savaged people, and he was a puppy dog with me. But and then I brought that stallion around to where he wouldn't savage people. He was just misunderstood. So I can see horses on a mental level and really get inside a horse's head. That's my greatest skill set, right? Second greatest is identifying talent, but first would be that. So when I see it from a different angle, this sport is more mental than it is physical. Physical is a huge piece, but there's a huge mental component in horse racing that is missed. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. They look at a horse, they say the horse is fast, and they think the horse is going to continue to be a good horse and be fast, but they don't realize this game is just as much mental as any human sport. So again, when we go down to impressive and we say horses are impressive and they win impressive, again, he did it against grade 1 winners. So yes, that is hugely impressive. So again, we could say it and look at it this way. James Harden is an extremely impressive basketball player, can score points in bunches, can destroy people, put him in the playoffs, can't find him, right? Game gets tough mentally, he's not around. He's not the guy that can put a team on his back and carry him across the line. So that is the next question. He beat grade 1 horses soundly. So am I knocking this horse? Am I on the bandwagon? I'm on the bandwagon of saying he is the best in the United States right now at 1.25 miles. Okay. Now's the next step. Now you took on, horses that if I was going to rank the Breeders' Cup Classic, you took on the 5th best horse in the country, and you took on 5th and below. You have not taken on the top 4 yet. You're number 1, but there's still 2, 3, and 4 sitting right behind you, right? Now face those horses, and if you beat them as soundly as you just beat 5 through 8, well, then we can have the conversation and say, you're the crown prince, you're amazing, you're the best horse in the last 3-4 years, maybe even the last 10 years, you're super impressive. You're not in the conversation of GOAT yet, but you're getting closer. And that is the thing, is throw it down with a horse that is proven, that has been looked in the eye, that has still beaten horses, and that can run with you. And if you destroy that horse in a race, now it's a whole different conversation. So it's the same thing, right? You've got all types of athletes that can run, and they're fast when they run. Then they go to the Olympics and they're nowhere to be found. So get on the world stage, prove it again on the world stage, and then you can be put in the GOAT conversations. And again, I still don't think it's fair, but you have more to your resume to say, hey, look, I faced, because to me, Life is Good is also a horse of a lifetime. So It will be interesting to see those two face off.
Yeah, no, for sure. But again, I'm just not down with that whole GOAT, thing. I had the conversation with Mike Smith once on an interview I did with him. He rode so many great horses throughout his career, and we would, talking about, comparing them, and he said something that I agree with wholeheartedly. He said that no matter how good a resume is, and no matter how good past performances may look, when you take horses from different eras, even different years, you can't say who's better than who unless you put them in the gate together, because they're athletes. They rise to the occasion. They don't rise to the occasion. Some perform better against others than others do. You just never know unless you put them in the gate. I talk the same thing. I make a lot of boxing comparisons. My opinion, okay? And I don't say anybody is the GOAT. Rocky Marciano never lost. Okay, heavyweight, you could say the GOAT. Muhammad Ali, the GOAT. In my opinion, as watching fighters and someone who's been in the ring a little bit fooling around, I would say that when Mike Tyson was in his prime, no one could beat him. Doesn't make him the GOAT, doesn't make him the best ever. I just think when he was in his prime, I don't care who you put in the ring with him, they were getting knocked out. That's just my opinion. Until you put somebody in the ring on any given day, you don't know, which is why I think all those kind of conversations are just talk. Don't.
I mean, it's you said it right. It's super interesting, and when I played athletics, I was a guy who could elevate my game to the level of who I was competing against. There's times, and Dominique's giving me a hard time. I'll play basketball against some guys and play terrible. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I wasn't really interested. I was just fooling around. It didn't, and then I'll play against somebody who's really good, and light bulb switches on, and you push yourself to another level.
No question. Right.
So it's kind of, that is a thing. And think about it this way, right? For those of you who might have been high level athletes, or for those of you who might have played sports, were you the one in the gym that when you're doing push-ups against your teammates, are you the one that even when your arms are tired and you're dead and you can't give one more, Are you willing to go that extra step to beat the guy who's next to you, right? And that's elite level athletics. The same thing with boxing. Taking a hit, but I can still get back up. Take another hit, I can still go back up. It's the thing with elite fighters as well. So when we talk about elite, that separation again goes down to mental toughness. When your tank is empty, do you have something left to fight it out to make sure you win? And the best racehorses do. Okay, their tanks aren't full. They're dead. They're rubber legged, but they're still fighting it out. And that's why you cannot compare until you put them in the gate next to each other.
Right, and I know you've boxed, so you'll understand this. But if you've ever watched a fight and somebody's losing and it's the last round, and they've got a shot, but they've got to hit. They've got to either knock the guy out or score some points and win the last round, and they're just not throwing. And you're like, what's wrong with you? Throw. But you know, because you've been in the ring, there are some times, okay, when you just can't even throw a weak jab because you get that exhausted in boxing. And the only thing that can make you do it, it's not, you're already out of condition. The tank is empty. Your mind, you want to do it. The only thing that could make you keep going is that heart. Okay, because you just do it, you know, and that's something you can't train, you can't condition for, you know, it's that extra push-up, like you said, in the gym. It's either there and you've got that spirit and that heart, or you don't, you know. And you never find it out until somebody's really in that condition, you know. Like I always say, like you said, 90% of this game is half mental. So yeah, it's just it is what it is. But I think that's a pretty good assessment of Flightline. All the Flightline fans and all the bandwagon people and all the GOAT people, no insult meant, no disparity meant at all. Everybody saw what he did. We're all equally impressed with what he did. We just have everybody has their own take on it, and it's, you know, not to take anything away from the race he ran on Saturday, which I think everybody will agree, if he runs again at Keeneland, the race is likely for second. Yeah, but you know, again, he's got to do it. But you know, I just don't subscribe to that GOAT and best ever stuff. Like I said, I named half a dozen horses that could, you know, go resume to resume with him, and there's literally 100 more. Man of War is on the wall back there. I mean, the records of some of these horses are completely ridiculous, and some of them ran with a lot less therapeutic and medicinal help than is available today, and they had the same issues back then that they have today, because they were horses. But let's move on to the next. We got a couple more to cover. Flightline got the bulk of the attention. He deserved it. He earned it. He got it. Let's hope we see him. I'll close with this. If he's a late scratch at the Breeders' Cup, I will dread it, but I will not be surprised.
Gotcha. So maybe we talk about that.
I hope it doesn't happen.
Well, maybe we talk about the next horse in the division who just punched his ticket, Olympiad, who won the Jockey Club Gold Cup.
Yeah. Listen, I was very hesitant to think that he was going to bounce back. I always look at it as a negative when a really good horse is on a roll and then get drilled by another good horse when they come back. Sometimes I'm always fearful that it takes a little bit of their confidence away. And it didn't with him. He got drilled by Life is Good, and he just came back and said, you know what? I'm still in the hunt. I'm still in the game. And he's got, you know, while we're talking about the Classic, he's got a perfect style to capitalize on two horses, you know, hooking up early, because he'll be the one in the catbird seat. He'll be probably in front of the horse like Epicenter, and probably getting the jump on those horses. And, you know, he doesn't get the recognition that Life is Good and Flightline get, and maybe even that Epicenter will get it. The windows come that day. But Olympiad's a nice horse. He really is.
I thought he ran a great race, you know, and to see him do what he did, and it was a good field, right? American Revolution ran second. I thought it was. Yeah. You know, it was a solid field. If you were to ask me which was the better field, I would have said the Pacific Classic was a better field. So that's why when I see what Flightline did, it was really impressive. To me, Olympiad is a very good horse, and I agree with you. To me, he's the fourth best in the country at the moment. I think he punched his ticket. I think he's very good. For me, the rankings go Flightline, Life is Good, Epicenter, him. So he's definitely a horse that could be in the mix, and his running style makes it really interesting when we get to the Breeders' Cup Classic. And it was great to see it. And you said it right. You take Life is Good out, he's proving that he's the best horse in the division when Life is Good isn't in the race. So it was good to see him bounce back, have a confidence, get his confidence back up, going in the right way. You know, he's got so much class. Like, you look at him in the paddock and you look at some of the other horses that were in the race, and I kept trying to say, oh, I'm going to pick against him, and let me see if I can find a little bit more value, or find a horse that might be able to beat him or run in the mix. And he had so much class that he just exuded as he walked around the paddock that you couldn't, right? He just was doing so well and ran such a great race.
I managed to pick against him. I bet American Revolution, so.
I got it.
But I wasn't.
So you weren't in the paddock. You weren't in the paddock,
right? Yeah.
I was in the paddock trying to look. And the same thing yesterday with the Spinaway, which different race. I mean, when I walked and saw those fillies in the paddock, yes, she won a maiden auction race, because she was bought for 40,000, so she qualified. But that filly of Serpes again looked like the part. And a lot of it, when I'll do handicapping off of form. And John, you're probably way better on a whole different level than me, handicapping off of form. And then I'll do picks on physical, and then I'll balance the two and say, okay, based on form, based on physical, based on how these horses are warming up, what does it look like? The third piece for me when I'm looking at a race is, how does that horse warm up? So he could still be the greatest horse in the race, look good in the paddock, and warm up and might look a little bit tight behind. And I said, well, that horse is not his game today. So anyways, it was very impressive to see. Again, fourth on my list right now going into the Classic, so he'd have to take a big jump to be up with the first three, but he ran a great race.
Yeah, no, we're on the same page. Next one, Virginia Joy punched her way in through the benefit of an extremely slow pace on the front end. Chad Brown was realistic about it and recognized that, and said she, is likely, might not go to the Breeders' Cup because he doesn't expect that same kind of scenario. But my take out of that race was Warlike Goddess, who was bottled up on the inside, never got out. Joel kind of was a little patient, maybe a little overconfident. Maybe he just couldn't get her out. I'm not really sure. But I didn't think it was one of his better rides with a filly like that. But I do think it was the kind of ride and race that will set her up very nice for the Breeders' Cup going forward off that trip. So of those two, although Virginia Joy may not go, if they both went, I would much favor Warlike Goddess to inhale her next time. And I think she goes forward off that race. And if none of the top Euro fillies come, I think she's going to be a handful to beat.
I agree. I think, when I saw those fractions up there, I said, oh, this race is getting stolen off the front end, and to see Warlike Goddess close into that, for me, with some of the trouble that she had during the race, was extremely impressive. I mean, they went 53 for the half mile. You're not going to get that in a Breeders' Cup race. So Virginia Joy, got to take your hat off to her, because she did push, she did fight, she did keep going even when Warlike Goddess was running at her, and she made sure she got the job done. And masterful ride by Jose. I mean, no, it was Irad for Virginia Joy. Masterful ride by him, understanding what he was doing. But what was interesting, and if you look throughout the card, on that card, and we talked about this when we interviewed Jose and Irad, of how they are good Wednesday through Sunday, right? Doesn't matter if it's a claiming race, doesn't matter if it's an allowance race, doesn't matter if it's a stakes race, they're usually on. And I've seen over the years, and I know a lot of people, and he's a friend, right? So I don't really want to say anything negative, but Joel does have good days and he has bad days. And I have noticed that Saturday was a day where he made some judgment calls on rides that cost a lot of his mounts. And Warlike Goddess was definitely one of them. Sitting too far back off of a 53 pace, you should understand that you're going that slow, and you need to be a little bit closer to be able to catch something that's trying to be stolen off the front end like Irad did. And kudos to Irad to be able to fool all the riders that they were going a little bit quicker than, or they might have had enough horse to get her. I mean, he rode an incredible race. So yes, to me, Warlike Goddess is a substantial filly who should be in the mix. And this race sets her up great going into the Breeders' Cup.
Agreed. I was super impressed out at Del Mar, and just this horse's whole body of work, I think, is just noteworthy. But Lieutenant Dane is a tough horse not to really like and respect. I mean, you know, last year in the Breeders' Cup at Del Mar, he showed up. He didn't win, but I think he ran a hell of a second. You know, now he's off a layoff, comes back running, gets himself in the race again. I mean, how do you not love this horse? You know, I mean, I don't know that he can win it because that race just comes up so tough. But you gotta respect him. I mean, he's a war horse. You know, he really brings it. You know, he's real good, and you know, he beats horses that are a little better than him with that heart that we talked about for that extra push up or that extra punch. He's definitely got that, and will throw down. No.
Yeah, he exploded. I mean, you could tell that he was in a tight position coming off the turn. And Del Mar's turf course is a tough one. It's a very tight turn coming into the stretch. And if you don't get running room, you can get stuck. And you could tell around the quarter pole, he looked stuck. And the question was, is he going to come through? And he came off the fence a little bit. And then the fact that he was, as soon as they turned his head loose, he exploded through the hole and just quickened unbelievably. So, I mean, they went 55 and change for the 5/8, which is substantial, obviously. I think, you know, I was wanting to watch the race and say, does this horse fit in the mix? And, you know, because I'm blanking on the horse that Christoph has here on the East Coast, who's been tearing it up in the 5 furlong division. But,
Right.
And then we've got to talk about Best Pal. Best Pal's a substantial horse too when he's on his A game. But that turn of foot,
Golden Pal, isn't that his name?
Golden Pal.
Wesley
Yeah,
Ward
Best
horse,
Pal.
yeah.
Best Pal was a
Best
California
Pal's
horse.
a long time
Yeah,
ago, right?
yeah. But no, I think seeing that turn of foot and how he was able to explode on a turf course in California was substantial because they weren't crawling, they weren't going slow, and he just quickened and blew right by him.
Yeah, he's not. He's a super nice horse, and you know, he's the kind of horse that if they make a mistake or you know he can pop up and surprise a lot of people, and he'll get underestimated in those kind of spots. But that could be a mistake, and I think he showed it last year when he ran second. He's a racehorse. I like him a lot.
Well, in California, we are known in California for speed, and some people sometimes forget that, right? So our sprinters are substantial in California, be it grass or dirt. And a lot of times, you know, this industry, and I love it to death, but it's very East Coast biased. And a lot of horses in California never get the respect they deserve because to the industry as a whole, well, that's California. They're not facing East Coast horses. But ask any trainer who's ever been in California, or any trainer who gets a horse on the East Coast that was once in California, our sprinters are very, very good horses, and their form does translate. So you can never count out a substantial California sprinter in any division.
You know, it's funny you say that because it is a little East Coast bias, and I wonder why there were people even over the weekend saying, well, Flightline's got to prove it in New York or on the East Coast. He already won the Met Mile. He did, you know, so I guess they overlooked that. And California had a heck of a run with the Kentucky Derby for a while where they were just winning it, you know, winning it after winning it after winning it. California. So why that East Coast bias exists, I'm really not sure. I don't think it's warranted at all, and I'm an East Coast guy, but you know, it does exist a little bit. Even Pratt, you know, well, to win the Eclipse, I got to go ride in, you know, in Saratoga. So. Unfortunately,
well, the other thing, we see it too, and this is very interesting, and a lot of people don't always recognize it, right? So it happens in the breeding shed. So you can see superior horses come out of California that might never stepped across the pond, and you know, might not have come out, and not across the pond, that's going overseas, sorry. It's my coffee's wearing off, but across the country and coming out and facing grade 1 horses, and when they retire to the breeding shed, they're not as popular as those who competed in Saratoga. And so what tends to happen in the business is there's very much you need to prove yourself to us, be it in Kentucky or be it in New York, before we'll say you're as good as our horses on this side of the country. Here's the thing. Most of the horses in California are Kentucky breds. They're just running on a different circuit. And if you look at the quality of the horses in California, they're still very good. So you do see it down the line, which I find it's kind of fun, especially when you help people manage their mares and you plan breedings, because you can sometimes get a discount on a horse that ran in California. And you'll see it over and over. Into Mischief is a fine example of it, right? Into Mischief had proven it over and over and over again that he was the elite stallion in the United States, but nobody wanted to give him the credit until, for whatever reason, right? And then Authentic wins the Derby, and then next thing you know, everybody says, okay, we can say he's legit now. But a horse that stood at $5,000 that had 2 horses in the Kentucky Derby in his first crop and kept getting better and better and better, it takes a while, and you can get deals on stallions. So if there's horses in California that you like that might not take the trip out east, and let's say they win in California and win the Breeders' Cup in California, you'll get them at a substantial discount to a horse that then came over and ran and won the Whitney and proved himself on the East Coast, and then goes to the breeding shed.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. The last but certainly not least horse on our list that punched their ticket to the Breeders' Cup, Gold Phoenix. What was your take on Gold Phoenix, and what do you think of him as a Breeders' Cup type horse?
I mean, what was interesting when you look at that race, they actually ran the final quarter probably quicker than the other quarters during the race. I think they came home in 24 and change, and they had been clicking off 25s and slowing down the pace. So they all accelerated, and he just accelerated faster than the group. Does it make him a horse that I think is a threat? I think, John, you and I are on the same page. The weakest division in America right now is the older male turf horses going along. And I think it's a substantial, yes, he's Irish bred. Yes, he came over at Hamo, same thing, right? He's top, until the last race, he was looking like the top East Coast grass horse in the older male division. He was a Group 3 horse in France. So these are European horses, but they weren't the top tier. When the top tier steps over, we're running in a very different category. So I think he was great in the race, ran a phenomenal race. Hats off to Little Red Feather Racing for, and Phil D'Amato for doing a great job with this horse. I still think our division in the older male turf division is extremely weak this year.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I didn't think that field was very strong on paper, in addition to the whole division being a little bit weak. So I think we're on the same page there. I think that's a wrap. 5 horses earned their ticket in. Virginia Joy probably doesn't go, but Warlike Goddess, who we talked about, probably does. And we both were more impressed with her than the winner anyway, taking nothing away from the winner. I think that was an interesting and objective and fair discussion of Flightline and kind of putting it in a realistic perspective, which I haven't really seen done anywhere. But I think it's good to, keep your feet on the ground with things like that. So closing day at Saratoga, you're heading back home. The Breeders' Cup will be in your backyard before you know it.
Yeah, it's an exciting day. I mean, today we purchased the half sister to Mo Strike 4 years ago for a client, and so we're pulling for Mo Strike to get that grade 1 win today, and just help increase her value. It's a mare that's in full good magic at the moment, and we'll see who we breed her back to based on how that horse does today. But it should be exciting. I mean, obviously, it's exciting time of year, and as you said, honest assessment of Flightline, John. I think this is a show that we say unfiltered Flightline, hashtag, Breeders' Cup win and you're in, because we very much did our unfiltered show when we discussed Flightline and then gave our honest opinion about the rest of the horses. So sad that Saratoga's ending. It's kind of, you have so much fun with people that you enjoy that then go to their separate parts of the country, once the meet closes. But I kind of had a tear in my eye saying goodbye to some of the horses that we have, because I won't be seeing them every morning like I did up here. I'll get to see them every now and again as we go. But not looking forward to leaving. But maybe get a little breather for a day before the marathon of Keeneland September begins, when we start inspecting yearlings on Friday.
Yeah, no, I know you jump right from the flame into the fire, so not much downtime, and then the Breeders' Cup will be rolling around right after that. So this is the life we've chosen.
Oh, but it's the life we love too. I mean, that's why your walls like your wall is, and my mind is full of pictures like that. So I since I move so often, I can't put anything on a wall.
Absolutely. All right, that's a wrap. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Ciao for now, and we will of course be back with a lot more before you know it.
Perfect.
Gold
Thanks,
standard
guys.
and past performance information is now free, exclusively on DRF Bets. Join DRF Bets with the promo code WINNING. Get a $250 first deposit match bonus, a $10 free bet, and free formulator already uploaded to your account. Access Formulator's premium features, including sortable trainer stats, race replays, personalized trip notes, and lots more. Free formulator, exclusively on DRF Bets.
Nobody does it better.